The Pac-12 season is just getting started, but we are basically at the midway point of the college basketball season. What do we know about Arizona? What do we know about the Pac?
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it Locked On Wildcats. This show is brought to you by Jase Medical. All right, now the Pac-12 is basically still kind of in its infancy this year, in the last year of Pac-12 basketball, but we do know enough to be able to talk a little bit and talk about a little bit of it with knowledge about where everything is in the conference and where everything should go. And, we're going to look at kind of the preseason expectations, where exactly everybody stands. Now, the first one is, going into the year, I think most people thought that it was going to be Arizona and USC. Now, Arizona is clearly right there. Listen, there's been some bumps, but at the end of the day, I'll still take Arizona to win this conference. But the big surprise, and I think something that is taking a lot of folks back, has been USC. USC to me is, listen, I know a lot of people bash Andy Enfield. I am not one of those people that bash Andy Enfield. I actually think Andy Enfield's done a pretty good job, and I think you could make the case that USC is he's the best coach in USC history. Now you might say, well, I mean, is that really saying much? That would be a fair point, but that is neither here nor is it there. But overall, I do think that this is a team. This is a program under him that has done pretty well. I mean, you got the Elite Eight. Granted, it was in the COVID year, but you can almost always count on them for 25 games and a top 3 finish in the conference. That has not happened this year, and quite frankly, there's no reason that it shouldn't have had that they should be in the peril that they are, because you brought in the number 1 point guard in the entire country in Isaiah Collier, and Isaiah Collier can play. You can watch them for 5 seconds and say that is what a top 5 pick looks like, and lo and behold, he is on all kinds of draft charts as a top 5 prospect. Then you've also got Boogie Ellis. I think coming back, a lot of people thought that Boogie Ellis, including myself, probably thought that Boogie Ellis was probably the odds-on favorite for the conference preseason player of the year. Probably good for 20 points, et cetera, et cetera. Well, for whatever reason, that backcourt has just not meshed. And again, I like Andy Enfield. He's never been known as a master tactician, that's for sure. So having these guys not playing their best has been a little bit of an issue. And then up front, I think that, listen, you lost some players, but you got Bronny James back in. Now, listen, Bronny isn't bad by any means, but there's been kind of like 4 incarnations of Bronny. People that thought he was going to be LeBron, people that thought he stunk, and now people that are probably overhyping him. He's going to be an NBA player, but he's also not his father, obviously. He's going to be probably a fringe first-round pick whenever that time does come, at least if we're just talking on pure talent. But then up front, Vince Iwuchukwu, he's been a disappointment. I thought Big Vince, the Prince, was going to be able to make a big jump this year. He has not been able to make that jump, and I think that's been disappointing for a lot of folks around the USC program because, again, Vince has got some skills. Vince was a top 25 player. Granted, he had the setback with the heart, but either way. And then when you look at DJ Rodman, Kobe Johnson, et cetera, it's just not been what I think a lot of people were cracking it up to be. And again, at the end of the day, that's on Andy Enfield. Andy Enfield has a lot of talent there, and he's got to be able to do better with it. Now, let's keep in LA. Maybe even a bigger disappointment. Well, no, not a bigger disappointment, but also a massive disappointment has been UCLA. Listen, there were a lot of people that asked, well, what's Tommy Lloyd going to be able to do? Or, once he doesn't have all of Sean Miller's players. Well, you know what? We're looking at it right now, and the product doesn't stink by any means. And not only does the product not stink, it's a fairly good product. But I do think that it's fair to say that this has been a massive disappointment. And I think a big part of that was that you don't have any of your players anymore. You got to remember, you inherited a lot of really, really good players. You inherited a player in Tiger Campbell, Jaime Jaquez. Now, granted, you had to recruit those guys. Totally get it. You had to recruit those players, but at the same time, this was also a roster that you inherited that was pretty loaded. And not only was it pretty loaded, there was a lot to like there. That obviously has gone by the wayside now that he's had to find his own players. And what he's done is he's brought together kind of a smorgasbord of Europeans, foreigners, and kind of under, mid top 50 type players. But my problem with Mick Cronin is that he throws everybody under the bus. I have no clue why any player would want to go play for Mick Cronin. None. If you don't play well, he basically says, well, you know what? You're not smart enough to play in my system. I mean, literally, that's the kind of stuff he says, and I just don't get that. I don't get the appeal as to why you would want to. I don't get the appeal as to why you would want to. Why you would want to play for him, and I just don't think that this thing's going to end well. This feels very much like a Ben Howland type situation, and not only that, it feels like. It feels kind of like we're at the stage now where when is this thing going to unravel? Because, again, when you've got players like Sebastian Mack who've got talent, but at the end of the day, like when Cronin says, I wouldn't be playing. I'd be playing him 5 minutes a game if I had a veteran team. I'm getting out of there, man. It's one thing to be called out behind the scenes. It's one thing to be called out publicly. Mick Cronin, and honestly, listen, when you're a basketball coach, you've got to be able to toe that line between being intense and being, somebody that still cares about the kids. You don't ever get the sense that Mick Cronin cares about those kids. I don't understand why anybody would want to go play for Mick Cronin. No idea. But they've also been a terrible disappointment on the court. They're scattershot. They don't look like they have they certainly don't have the talent. I mean, you saw, I think, what Jaime Jaquez, with Jalen Clark, with Tiger Campbell were able to kind of bring people through. They don't have any of that anymore. And I think it's going to be a long season for UCLA. And I'm also curious to see if it's going to be a long season or what this really means for UCLA big picture, because you're going into the Big Ten. Granted, Big Ten basketball sucks. But I'm also going to be very curious to see how this all does play out. Now, a team that I think is probably the only team in the talent or a conference that can look at Arizona head on with talent from a talent perspective. We're going to talk about that team next. But first, FanDuel. Let's say you're saying to yourself, man, I really enjoy the Pac. And not only do I enjoy the Pac, this is something where I want to get some money in the game. FanDuel.com/lockedon, my friends. Check it out. FanDuel.com/lockedon. All kinds of good stuff there. You can bet on games. You can bet on games. Your money's good. You can find props. You can find odds. You can find wagers. You can find all kinds of stuff. So again, check it out. FanDuel.com/lockedon. You will thank me later, my friends. Trust me, you will thank me later, because there is all kinds of great stuff here. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now we're going to save the best for last, and that's Arizona. But now we're going to talk about Oregon. Oregon is the only team in the conference, I think, when they are fully healthy, it can match Arizona from a talent perspective. And that all goes, the reason that this team is a lot better this year is Jackson Shelstad. Jackson Shelstad is an absolute monster. Reminds me a little bit of Mike Bibby. And just the way that he controls the game, the way that he is able to get players in, Shelstad's unique for sure. And honestly, if I had to take any point guard in the conference to win a game, I'm taking Jackson Shelstad. He's that good. Now, I think if you're Oregon, you're a little bit worried. Is he going to play himself into a first-round pick? You're not really thrilled about that, because I think you wanted to get 2 years out of him. But he's great. Controls the game, can shoot. He's got a clutch factor. Just a really, really good basketball player. And then obviously, N'Faly Dante, they got to get him healthy, because if N'Faly Dante is healthy, then he is the best big man in the conference. At about 7 foot, 240, he can finish around the hoop. He's as big as Umar Ballo, so they don't need to double. He's kind of the key to it. If you get him back, then you're going to be able to rock and roll, and I think that you're going to cause a lot of problems for people. Then you also got to get back Nate Biddle, the ex-5-star big man, 7'1", huge dude, can shoot the three. It sounds like he's going to be back a lot sooner than people thought because of the way that his wrist is healing. We'll see about that. But Kwame Evans has been more than good enough down low for Oregon. And then on the perimeter with Jermaine Couisnard, with Aquando, you've got enough players. Keyshawn Bartholomew is a solid backup. That's the one team that I think if you're Arizona, you look at and you're like, all right, well, from a talent head-on perspective, they're going to be interesting. So Oregon, definitely a team to keep an eye on as they get healthy. And then Colorado, another team. If they're healthy, Colorado's very good. Now, I don't put them in the same caliber of talent that I do Oregon or Arizona, but listen, when you've got KJ Simpson, who's a very, very good point guard, we all know that. Not only do you have KJ Simpson, you also have you've also got Cody Williams. Nice call, Sheer, being wrong on Cody Williams. Cody Williams is good, but you got to get Cody Williams healthy. And not only do you got to get Cody Williams healthy, you've got to be able to get him to the point where you've got to be get to the point where you've got him out there playing. And not only do you have him out there playing, you've got to be able to get him to the point where he's playing 30 minutes a game, because he's one of your most indispensable players. I do think that he is, if he's healthy, along with Tristan da Silva, that becomes an issue for the rest of the conference. But they got to be fully healthy, because they got 4 dudes that can really play in da Silva, Eddie Lampkin, Cody Williams, and KJ Simpson. You got to be able to get those in there. And if you get them in there, I think you're going to be more than okay. I think they're a tournament team. I don't think they're as good as Arizona, but I also don't think that they're I think they're probably about a top 25 team. And we'll find out. We'll find out exactly where all that stands, but they got to get healthy, just like Oregon. All right, now ASU, or let's talk Utah for a second. Utah's fascinating to me. Their coach is big time. He feels like he's going to be able to go to a bigger school here soon. He just kind of checks off the boxes. You talk with people around the scene. And they all say that he's just kind of a dude that gets it. And I think he's done a good job at Utah. Utah's obviously a school that I think you're somewhat limited in, but not a bad team. I think as long as they're there, they're going to be solid. It's just tough to get a real high caliber player at Utah. All right, now ASU, they've started out fast. Listen, when you watch Bobby Hurley's teams, you're never going to come away saying, man, that was a coaching masterpiece. I mean, that's really impossible to say that, because there isn't any real coaching going on. But here's what we do know about Bobby Hurley, and this is why I'll always give Bobby Hurley some credit. He is his players play hard for him. He's intense. And by all accounts, I've heard this from a lot of people, he's a good dude. And ASU, they've got a lot of length. They've got a lot of athleticism. But again, his roster construction is generally year in and year out terrible. I don't know exactly what he's trying to do. But the one thing that I do know is that he is he's going to throw out a lot of length. He's going to throw out a lot of athleticism, and he's got some players. He's got some dogs. He's got, I like Frankie Collins. I like Lonzo Gaffney. So again, you've got some players there, but again, they're always going to be limited in how good they can be. But I think there's also the stage where you also know that they're athletic and that they're going to play really hard. And, that means a lot, because if you're athletic and you play hard, you've already got something over half the teams in the conference. So they're going to be interesting to see if they can sustain this, because again, maybe it'll be the reverse Hurley situation where you go slow, where you start out slow and then you get hot. Generally, you start out hot and then you kind of peter off. We'll find out. But again, there's some stuff to like there. Now, when you look at the team that just destroyed Arizona, Stanford. Listen, I mean, Jared Haas is a terrible coach. He's been there what, 8 years now? I'm not even sure if he's ever had a winning record. And he's also kind of the embodiment, I think, of why people don't take the Pac-12 or take Pac-12 basketball seriously, because in no other conference would that guy still be the coach there. No, you don't get to the tournament. You don't do anything. Yeah, this kind of stinks. You obviously lost a player to North Carolina this past year. You still got some good. You still got a little bit of talent. Spencer Jones has been there 7 years. And then you've got Carlisle, who came in, who's a 5-star kid. So again, you watch them, and again, you got some skills there, but they're going to be very much, if they're hitting their shots, they're going to be good. If they're not hitting their shots, they're not. I mean, but that's kind of where that team is. Now, listen, they took Arizona out to the woodshed Maples, so you got to give them credit for that. But I just wonder at the end of the day just how far you can really go with a Jared Haas team. And I think I've answered that question. Now, one other team before we get to the big dogs here. Washington. Washington doesn't stink. They're not good, but they don't stink. Now, again, they've started off real slow in conference. Keon Brooks is really, really good. Losing Minifield this past offseason was a big loss for them, but not bad. But either way, that's a school that can do a lot better than what they have, I believe, in Mike Hopkins. Mike Hopkins, to me, is very boring, and he doesn't do really anything for me. Plus, I don't know why any kid would really be interested in playing a zone as your base defense. That's not fun. All right, now we're going to talk about the big dogs in the conference coming up here next. But first, Jase Medical. Jase Medical. All right, now, in this day and age, with all kinds of stuff going on, you never really know what the next thing to worry about is, or whatever the case may be, because, there's, don't know. Listen, medical emergencies can be right around the corner. We know that there can be long waits. Jase Medical has that stuff, so you can have that at your home. Use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. Again, you're going to thank me later on this one. Jase Medical, prepare for the rainy day. Don't let the rainy day prepare for you. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now Arizona, the big dogs. All right, now listen, this has been kind of an up and down couple weeks for Arizona, but here's what I think we know at this point. Arizona's still, even with some of the struggles, not going to lose many games, and I would still peg them as the odds-on favorite to win this conference. Honestly, just because, first of all, the roster is better than anybody else. You could maybe make the case for Oregon, maybe. But that's it. Because when Arizona's apex, I think, is at, maybe Oregon's. But Arizona just kind of checks off all the boxes from a talent perspective. You got the scoring guard that can make plays off the bounce. You got the do-it-all small forward. You got the point guard who's very talented, and when he's playing well, he's a real problem. And then up front, you got Keyshawn Johnson. You got Umar Ballo, leader of men. It's just like I said, it's just a well-constructed team. And then you bring in talent off the bench. You bring in KJ Lewis. You bring in Jaden Bradley. These are guys that can all play. And so, that's something that I think if you're an Arizona fan, you got to look at it and say, all right. And plus, they're tougher. This is a lot tougher team than last year's team. So you got to give Tommy Lloyd a lot of credit for that. But again, this team to me, like we talked about before, this team to me is going to be judged by what they do in November, what they do in March. Will not be judged by what they do in November. Listen. In 2 years, Tommy Lloyd's teams have looked terrible in the postseason, every single game. Wright State was a battle in the first half, honestly. Obviously, Arizona took over in the second half. They looked like terrible against TCU. They looked terrible against Houston, and then they looked awful against Princeton. So obviously, Tommy Lloyd had to retool, and so far, so good. But it's going to be interesting to see where exactly like I said, I think this team's going to win the conference. I think they probably go in as a 1 or a 2 seed at the least. Again, I'm not a sky is falling. I'm looking big picture. But, like I said, this team's going to be judged on March. You got a lot better talent in play. And that's something that Arizona is going to obviously have to take advantage of. And then The rest of the conference, honestly, you got a lot of teams that don't really matter. We talked about some teams that are disappointments that don't really matter, but then Oregon State, whatever. Washington State, whatever. Cal, gross. You just keep going on. I can't really say it about Stanford, but you get the gist. I'm happy to be getting out of here and going to the Big 12 next year, because the Big 12, again, the best basketball conference in the country. And not only is it the best basketball conference in the country, it's probably got the best fan base as well. And that's going to be fun, because Arizona's obviously got a dynamic fan base. That's going to be something that's going to be fun to watch, because teams are going to come to McHale. Arizona's going to go into rowdy environments. And honestly, I think it's going to get Arizona ready for the NCAA tournament in a way that the Pac-12 just can't. And I'll be interested to see if Tommy Lloyd continues to continues to go after scheduling in the manner in which he has, because there's certainly something to be said for that. But either way, Arizona is going to be fine. This is the last year of the conference. We're going to obviously keep you up to date. I love going around. I watch pretty much all these teams, but kind of the swan song, so I wanted to keep you up to date on that. All right, now we're going to get back into a little bit of Arizona football, some recruiting portal notes, internal development, all kinds of stuff. But again, no better time to back the A and be an Arizona Wildcat. And as always, thanks a ton for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. Again, we got a big week coming in front of us. Arizona football, Arizona basketball. Maybe we'll dive into a little bit of Arizona women's basketball as well. We shall see. But on that note, have a great rest of your Monday, and thanks for making this your first listen of the day.